Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Saraswati, Secretary General, Madras Chamber, and I welcome Saiba, the Program Associate with CWE, Council for Energy, Environment and Water, New Delhi. And just to give a brief introduction about the Madras Chamber to some of you who may be new, and to also introduce to Ms. Saiba. This is a 188-year-old or young chamber, Saiba, second oldest in the country and oldest in southern India, and obviously oldest in the state. And we have different activities like any other chamber. One of the unique initiatives which started was during our 175th year. The Sustainable Chennai Forum was launched. In fact, I'm seeing Mr. Shivaraman, our former president, who was there at that time. He was instrumental in starting this SCF as a participant here. We started this Sustainable Chennai Forum with the objective of creating a business case for sustainability and making Chennai a livable, lovable metropolis, whatever we say. And just as a sort of a model and which can be replicated in other cities. That was the idea. And we have 5 pillars for it: energy, wastewater, transport, urban greening, and water as the 5 pillars for our Sustainable Chennai Forum. And as I was mentioning you before the start of the program, we have been doing number of activities, number of trainings, roundtables, hand-holding. And one of the major activities we do is every year an Urban Thinkers Campus, which the Madras Chamber was the first one to bring it to Chennai, along with the UN-Habitat as a partner of the UN-Habitat. And that happens year on year. And we introduced last year the Sustainable Speaks talk series, because arising out of this Urban Thinkers Campus, we found a lot of topics which required more discussions. So we started this thing. As of now, it's going virtually. Maybe we will also see whether we could have someone in person alternatively. We have, as you could see, this is the 11th in the series. We have had, as Mr. Venkat was mentioning, on green hydrogen, Ramsar sites, what are the implications, climate financing, and even on water, Chennai water, the ground realities, probably during last water day. In fact, this year also we wanted to do it on March 22nd, the International Water Day, but we found water everywhere. So we thought we could have it a little later so that our people, our members will have the benefit of listening to more of such things. So here we are on a very, very interesting topic, what you had said on the circularity for wastewater usage, or how to treat the urban wastewater, because we always say it's used water, not wastewater. That is the thing we are talking about. And seeing the water crisis happening in states, and Chennai may also be not very far off. There had been studies which pointed out probably we have been escaping that 0 day, or we had a brief 0 day and escaped from it till now. But again, the summer is fast approaching. So we want to hear from you on probably one of the aspects on this used water management or circularity, applying circularity to that, to probably address this water crisis in urban cities, which we are sure we are going to see more and more with the kind of urbanization, especially in states like Tamil Nadu happening. So I would stop here. I would request all the delegates to keep your audio, video in mute so that we won't get intervened by the in the presentation. So I now request Saiba to start her presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction to MCCI. It's wonderful to know about its rich history. Also, thank you for inviting me for this session. My name is Saiba Gupta. I'm an urban planner and architect. I'm currently associated with the Sustainable Water Program at the Council on Energy, Environment and Water. My main area of work is the circular economy in wastewater management, as well as water bodies rejuvenation. And previously, my work involved working with development policies, specifically in the water and sanitation sectors. Today, I'll be talking about the importance, the need, and the potential of mainstreaming used water management, specifically for Indian cities or for urban areas. I'll just share my presentation. Now, when I talk about circular economy in used water management, I'm referring to the reuse of treated used water, specifically for non-potable purposes, that is water that is not meant for human contact. And the government of India has initiated this initiative to refer to wastewater as used water, to remove the negative connotation around the word wastewater, and to also promote the fact that we can actually treat it and reuse it, to reduce the very high pressure on our existing and scarce freshwater resources. Before I start with the talking about the topic, I'd like to introduce CEEW. The Council on Energy, Environment and Water aims to impact sustainable development at scale through data-backed evidence as well as outreach. This is based on three pillars of transformations, quality of life, and enablers. The sustainable water program that I am associated with is what impacts the quality of life, with circular economy as being a cross-cutting element across all of these themes. We are currently a multidisciplinary team of over 250 people. We're almost 298 as of today, I came to know. And we have a footprint in over 20 Indian states. We're engaging with different levels of government, national government, state government, as well as city authorities. Now, if we look at the Indian scenario in terms of water resources, this is a map for 2025 that shows the condition of the Indian river basins. If we look at the map, about 11 out of the 15 river basins in India will be experiencing water stress by 2025. That is, they will have below 1700 cubic meter per capita availability of water annually. And some of the river basins will actually be facing water scarcity. That is, their annual water availability will be less than 1000 cubic meter per capita. Further, if we look at some of the major Indian cities, UFW or unaccounted for water, that is water that may be lost due to water losses like leakages, or this is water that is consumed through unauthorized consumption, water that is not built, will be ranging from 13% to 60% in some cities of the total water supply. Hence, it's very essential to look at alternatives to improve the water use efficiency in our cities, as well as explore alternatives to fresh water. And treated used water is one such option that we must explore. This is a snapshot of the current wastewater or used water scenario in India. As of 2021, just from the urban areas in India, we were generating over 72,000 million liters per day of sewage. This is urban domestic sewage at the national scale that I'm referring to. And in 2021, there was sewage treatment capacity that was installed of 44%. But out of this, actually, the treatment that is happening is only 28%. This is due to system inefficiencies. In some area, there could be operation and maintenance issues. In some areas, the sewage network coverage is not enough. So the sewage treatment plants are actually not getting enough sewage to treat. So the actual treatment in the country currently is only 28%, which is about 20,000 MLD out of the 72,000 MLD that we are generating. As per our projections based on the current installed treatment capacity, we are considering the current capacity at 2021 as per the CPCB inventory of 2021. Based on that, we project that by 2050, there will be installed treatment capacity to treat 80% of the sewage that we are generating. Here, the sewage generation is based on the projections of urban population, and the treatment capacity projections are based on previous treatment capacity as well as 2021 treatment capacity. So if I'm saying that by 2050, we will be able to treat 80% of the sewage that we are generating, that would yield over 96,000 million liters of treated used water per day. So over 96,000 MLD of treated used water is available currently, will be available in the country by 2050. Now, this amount of treated use water has substantial market and economic implications if it is actually reused. So if we look at our projections, currently we are at 2021. There was 11,600 million cubic meters of treated used water available in the country in 2021 as per the installed treatment capacity that is already there in the country. If this treated used water was actually sold to different users for reuse, we could have generated rupees 630 million daily market value in 20 to 21. This is subject to a market mechanism being in place for the sale of treated used water. And by 2050, this number would go up to 1.9 billion of daily market value at the current market rate. If we specifically look at the irrigation sector, which has the predominant water demand in our country, the treated used water that was available in the country in 2021 was sufficient to irrigate 9 times the area of Delhi. By 2050, this would become 26 times the area of Delhi. And if that water that is currently available in the country, the treated used water, if it was actually used for irrigation, that could have generated an estimated 966 billion of revenue from the yield or the production that is produced from that land that is being irrigated using treated used water. And using treated used water for irrigation has some additional benefits as well, some co-benefits as well. Treated used water has inherent nutrient value, NPK, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And because of this inherent nutrient value, the dependence on fertilizers would have reduced, yielding about 50 million rupees of savings as of 2021. That is, if treated used water was used for irrigation at the national scale. Further, on account of reduced groundwater pumping, since we're replacing fresh water with treated used water, we could have saved or reduced 1.3 million of GHG emissions on account of using this water for the irrigation sector. And this is as per the current value at 2021. But in order to actually realize such an economic potential, it is important to strengthen the governance on use water treatment and reuse in India. If we look at the policy landscape in the country, currently 10 states in India that are marked on this map have a treated use water reuse policy in place. Rajasthan was the first state to adopt such a policy in 2016. West Bengal being the latest one in 2020. There are certain states like Maharashtra and Uttar Pradesh that have draft policies in place but have not adopted them or made them official yet. All of these policies, they recommend the use of treated used water for non-potable purposes. And also they specify certain mandatory uses. For example, thermal power plants that are located within a 50-kilometer radius from sewage treatment plants are obligated to use treated used water for their cleaning and cooling purposes. These 10 states were actually ahead of the national framework on safe reuse of treated water that was launched in 2022 by the National Mission for Clean Ganga. These 10 states had adopted their policies prior to the national framework being launched. And the AMRUT 2.0 mission, that is the Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation 2.0 that was launched in 2021, actually mandates that 20% of a city's water demand and 40% of the state's industrial water demand should be met by treated used water. So there are certain national level as well as state level policies that are in place in India. Even though it doesn't cover the entire country, currently there are only 10 states that have adopted such a policy. But if we look at these state policy, the actual implementation or the adoption of these policies in urban areas lies with the urban local bodies. Urban local bodies such as municipal corporations and municipal councils. So in order to understand how Indian cities are actually faring in use water management, we developed this municipal index for use water management that evaluates the performance of urban local bodies in the country in terms of their use water management, specifically in how well they are implementing a circular economy approach to use water management. So we chose those 10 states that currently have a reuse policy in place. And from these 10 states, we chose over 500 urban local bodies that represented class 1 and class 2 cities from these 10 states. So in total, this index evaluated the performance of 503 urban local bodies in the country. This evaluation was based on an assessment framework that we developed. This assessment framework comprises of 5 themes or sub-indexes: finance, infrastructure, efficiency, governance, and data and information. Each of these themes have a set of parameters under them, and each parameter has one or more indicators that were actually used to score these ULBs under those parameters. And then all of these scores across these parameters were consolidated and computed one score for each ULB, the 503 ULBs that we evaluated. We believe that each of these parameters are crucial for comprehensive use water management in urban areas specifically. Just to give an example, finance looks at how much of the ULB investment is directed towards use water management, or what is the level of cost recovery from used water management. Infrastructure looks at the primary infrastructure in terms of the collection and the treatment infrastructure at the city level. For example, the coverage of the sewage network, the collection efficiency of the sewage network, whether there are separate stormwater and drainage networks in the cities, and also what is the status of the polluted river stretches in the cities. Because the untreated used water that is generated in cities that is actually discharged into the water bodies, which is the main reason why the urban stretches of Indian rivers are the most polluted. For example, if you look at Delhi, 70% of River Yamuna's pollution lies in that small 22-kilometer stretch that it passes through Delhi. In terms of efficiency, we'll look at how much of the used water treatment capacity is actually utilized. As we saw earlier, there is a difference between the installed capacity and the actual capacity. How much of this treated used water is actually being reused, the energy and the cost efficiency of the treatment infrastructure, the quality of treated used water. Governance looks at whether there are updated city master plans available and whether they address reuse specific targets in the city master plans, whether there's a sewerage plan available, the adequacy of the ULB staff, etc. And lastly, data and information, which is a very important aspect, looks at whether there is open and accessible data for use water management at the municipal level. This is a snapshot of the results of this index, this evaluation of 500 plus ULBs in the country. So if we look at this, we have divided these cities based on their performance into 5 categories: aspiring, promising, performing, leading, and outstanding. This is based on the scores that they have received on our index. 80% of the ULBs fall under the promising and performing categories collectively. This implies that most cities have undertaken some basic interventions for use water management, but there are several areas of improvement that they need to actually strengthen their governance on use water management. On the right, that semicircular diagram shows the top kind of cities that have actually done well: Surat, Bangalore, Rohtak, Vadodara, Guru. Cities are the fast urbanizing cities that have very high water demand. And in order to combat this increasing water stress that they are facing, they are strengthening their used water management so that some of the pressure on their freshwater resources can be reduced. The top 2 cities, the only 2 cities that fell under the outstanding category were Surat and Bangalore. Bangalore has been in the news for the immense water stress and water scarcity that it is facing. And in order to actually combat with that scarcity refers to the fresh water scarcity. And use water is a separate aspect. So in order to combat that scarcity, they have actually undertaken quite a few interventions for strengthening their use water management. With, of course, improvement, there is a scope for a lot of improvement. None of the ULBs or states have received very high ranks, but these cities have done comparatively better than the other cities that we have assessed. If we look at the assessment across the 5 themes that I mentioned earlier, the first theme being finance, that is crucial. 90% of the ULBs, they require financial planning and investments in use water management. One city that stands out here is the city of Surat, wherein the Surat Municipal Corporation has actually dedicated 90% of its municipal investment towards sewage and septage management. The city is also recovering the cost of used water treatment by selling treated used water to users such as industries. The city of Bangalore is actually using almost 50% of the treated used water that the city is treating. Second, if we look at governance, 78% ULBs require strengthened governance measures. These measures could include having city-level reuse plans or reuse targets in place for the for the treatment infrastructure, as well as how much of the water do they plan to reuse over the target years. Also, these targets should be aligned with their city master plans. The city of Jaipur, for example, in its recent master plan, has included targets for the sewage infrastructure and the levels of reuse it targets to achieve. The third and the fourth measures in terms of infrastructure and efficiency. So we see that most of the city or many of the cities have the basic infrastructure for collection and treatment in place, but the efficiency of this infrastructure might not be necessarily very high. The efficiency could actually be the utilization levels of the sewage treatment infrastructure, the energy cost or the energy efficiency of the sewage treatment infrastructure, wherein what is required is that there is focus on low cost and energy efficient treatment infrastructure. Also, lastly, as I mentioned, data and information is a key area that ULBs need to focus on, because the access to updated and reliable data and information is actually essential for these ULBs to develop their reuse plans or for states to update their existing policies. We also looked at the 10 states that we had assessed in terms of the average performance of the ULBs within these 10 states. And these were the scores, or this was the ranking. Haryana and Karnataka have been the top ranking states. And we see that largely it is the north and northwestern states, Haryana, Punjab, Rajasthan, Gujarat, that are doing relatively well, whereas the eastern states such as West Bengal and Jharkhand are catching up. States such as Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh have scored relatively lower. One of the main reasons for this is the lack of data and information. As per the service level benchmarking mandated by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, each state is required to consolidate municipal level data for sewage, solid waste management, as well as water supply for the cities within the states. These states have either not compiled that level of data or have limited availability of that data, which has certainly impacted their performance on our index. Specifically, if we look at Gujarat, it is right in the middle of the ranking. Even though 5 of the top 20 ULBs that we had scored are in Gujarat, but its overall state ranking is somewhere in the middle. This is because of the varied performance of the ULBs within the state, where a few ULBs are doing very well, whereas some of the ULBs, especially those from tier 2 cities, do not even have the basic infrastructure in place for sewage collection and treatment. Now, these are some of the recommendations to strengthen used water management in India. This is based on the national framework on safe reuse of treated water in India from the state level policies that we have, as well as from some of the international best practices. So first and foremost is that used water should be considered as part of water resources management and hence should be integrated in all water management related policies, plans, and regulations. So this is a paradigm shift in ideology that we need towards used water management. Secondly, and very importantly, defining specific reuse purpose water quality standards. So currently, we only have discharge specific standards in place as per the CPHEO manual. What is required is reuse specific standards. So standards of the treated use water based on what is the intended end use of that water. The standard should be different for example, for industries, for agriculture, for thermal power plants, etc. And thirdly, and very importantly, is empowering urban local bodies to formulate and adopt long-term reuse plans. This is important because urban local bodies are the paramount authorities that are responsible for the implementation and the management of used water in terms of the infrastructure as well as the service delivery in cities. And hence, they should have reuse plans in place that actually set targets for reuse at the city level. Next is developing a comprehensive database for used water management at the ULB level. As I mentioned, access to updated data is essential for formulating such plans and to update existing plans. And hence, such a comprehensive database, such as the one that we have developed for this index, is important to be maintained at the ULB level and regularly updated so that there is a municipal database available for used water management. Improving financial viability, this is an essential aspect in order to actually implement reuse projects on ground. It is essential that there is cost recovery for the implementing authority, which is the urban local bodies here. In the next slides, I will be giving example of some business models that urban local bodies can actually adopt for implementing reuse projects on ground and ensuring cost recovery so that these projects can be implemented long-term in a sustainable manner. Another important point is leveraging technological developments. The focus should be on low-cost, energy-efficient technologies, as well as context-appropriate technologies should be adopted for used water treatment. And lastly, and very important, is investing in public outreach. Public acceptance of actually using treated used water is often the biggest barrier that we need to overcome. So just from our analysis of best practices, it is important to have information, education, and communication campaigns to get the end users, the actual end users on board, that they are the ones who will be using the treated used water. This is essential for actually implementing such projects on ground. Now, I'll be talking about some business models that urban local bodies can adopt at the city level for implementing treated used water reuse projects, giving some examples from Indian cities that are actually undertaking such projects. One such example, the first one is from Chennai. So the water supply and the sewerage board, what they're doing is that they are selling secondary treated used water from the STPs that are run by the municipality to industrial clusters. They are in a long-term agreement with an industrial cluster, and the ULB is actually selling the secondary treated used water to this cluster of industries. What this cluster of industry is doing, that on their own, they have set up their own tertiary treatment plant. So they are undertaking the cost of setting it up, the capital cost, as well as the operation and maintenance cost of this treated used water, which is further treating that secondary treated used water. And then they're using that tertiary treated used water for industrial purposes for amongst those cluster of industry. Such industrial uses could be cooling, cleaning, etc. What this has done is that initially the cost for the industries was quite high, But since this project has been implemented over a period of time, it's seen that the industries are actually gaining overall. Over time, they're paying less than what they would have paid for industrial water tariffs. At the same time, for the ULB, they're recovering the cost of their treatment by selling this water to the industries. They're further also providing the remaining sludge from the treatment to farmers as fertilizers for using in farming practices. Another model is that of decentralized used water management. Till now, we were talking about centralized used water management, but there are certain housing colonies. This example is from Auroville and Pondicherry, wherein a decentralized used water treatment plant has been set up within the colony, and the treated used water is being used for landscaping, flushing, cleaning, and other non-potable purposes. And by doing this, they have actually reduced their fresh water consumption by 45%, because earlier the fresh water was being used for such uses as well. A third and a very interesting model is sort of an exchange model between government authorities. So one is, of course, the government authorities or the urban local bodies can actually sell the treated used water, the secondary treated used water and treated sludge to farmers for use. And the treated used water can also be sold to the forest department for agroforestry use. An interesting example is what we saw is one of our visits to the Gwalior Municipal Corporation, wherein what they're doing is that the Water Resources Department in Gwalior supplies raw water to Gwalior Municipal Corporation, and Gwalior Municipal Corporation in turn sells treated used water to the Water Resources Department, who further provides it to farmers for irrigation. And the cost of the raw water and the treated used water is almost the same. So in terms of cost, they are breaking even. So this is also an interesting model that government authorities can implement, wherein two government authorities from the same city are actually exchanging raw water and treated used water for their uses. Then these are a couple of other business models that can be adopted. One is that of reuse certificates. This is a model wherein wastewater reuse certificates based on a cap and trade mechanism can be put in place. This is similar to that of the carbon market or the carbon trading scheme. And the state of Maharashtra is actually exploring such an initiative. So basically, the water reuse certificates mechanism is that an overall water reuse target is set for the large water users, and the users who will exceed this target can earn a water reuse certificates, which they can sell to those users who are not able to meet their targets. So these users who are not able to meet their targets can buy the water reuse certificates to offset the shortfall. So very similar to the carbon market trading system. Another interesting business model that can be adopted is that urban local bodies can leverage the corporate social responsibility models of private companies. So ULBs can engage with these private companies to, for example, train the farmers for the safe reuse of treated used water in their irrigation practices. And further, they can engage with supermarket schemes to buy back the crops from farmers who are actually practicing safe reuse for their cultivation purposes. So these are some of the business models that can actually be used to implement reuse projects on the ground, because financial viability is a key impediment for urban local bodies not undertaking wastewater to the potential wastewater reuse to the potential that it has. And this is on the basis of our interaction with various urban local bodies, where the key issue that they state for not reusing treated used water to its potential is cost recovery. So implementation of such business models can actually ensure cost recovery and financial viabilities for reuse projects on ground. This was my session. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Saiba. That's a very precise and very clear candid kind of a thing. There are questions in the chat box. I omitted to introduce Saiba, I should also add to her self-introduction that she worked on drafting the master plan of for Delhi 2041 along with the Delhi Development Authority. And she also worked on infrastructure projects around Chandigarh as well as development plans of new towns in Maharashtra. So that's really good to know about the various business models as well. So can we turn to the questions? Mr. Venkat, would you like to read out or you want any help? Or Saiba would like to do it yourself? Or should we read out?
Oh. Are these questions in the chat?
Yeah, there are.
Okay.
You want someone to read out? We can do that also.
Okay, I think I can start from the top.
Yes. The first question is, we don't see TN on the
Yes, so
CEEW map.
Tamil Nadu actually has a draft reuse policy in place, but we haven't considered it for our analysis because it has not yet been put out in the public domain. So the 10 states that we had considered for this analysis are the ones who have adopted their policies and have published their policies in the public domain. But as you saw, Tamil Nadu actually is undertaking a lot of interventions for water treatment and reuse, specifically in cities like Chennai, which, as ma'am mentioned, has been battling with water stress. And in order to combat that kind of water stress, a lot of interventions are being taken place for treating used water and actually reusing it for non-potable purposes, such as horticulture, landscaping, road cleaning, etc. Why have other states not adopted this policy, and what could be the major challenges the state faces in implementing this policy? That's a very good question. So right now, there are only 10 states that have adopted policies, with some states with draft policies in place. One major impediment was that the national framework for the safe reuse of treated water only came out last year, the beginning of last year. The draft came out in 2022, but the final policy came out in January 2023, which was only 1 year back. So when we don't have a national framework in place that actually recommends states to implement state level reuse policies, states will not sort of conform. So now we can expect that more than these 10 states should be adopting and formulating reuse policies. And these 10 states, that the existing states that have actually adopted these reuse policies, were the ones who had done it prior to even the national framework coming out. So now we can actually expect other states to be formulating reuse policies. For example, CEEW has recently looked at and sort of given comments on the Maharashtra reuse policy, which right now is in the draft stage and should most likely be getting adopted sometime this year. The third question is whether Tamil Nadu government is working on drafting policy. Yes, there is a draft policy in place that I am aware of, like I mentioned earlier. What about industrial wastewater treatment? Bangalore has many water bodies which are highly polluted, which are frothing, burning, and polluting groundwater. Yes, so this study that we're looking at is specifically looks at the centralized treatment for domestic use water. Now, for industrial wastewater, there are centralized effluent treatment plants, which ideally should only be treating industrial effluents. But often what happens is domestic and industrial effluents end up getting mixed up in our sewage network. That is one issue. And secondly, you rightly mentioned one of the main reasons for our water bodies being so highly polluted is the discharge of untreated used water in them, in addition to, of course, solid waste dumping, etc., and plastic pollution. But if we increase the treatment of our used water, so if we increase the treatment levels, and even if we use it just to discharge into our water bodies, it can actually improve the groundwater levels of our water bodies. Essentially, we should be treating it enough so that we can discharge some of it to our water bodies to rejuvenate these water bodies, as well as reusing it for other purposes so that we can reduce the pressure on our existing freshwater resources. And some cities are actually treating the used water and using that used water to fill it into and develop artificial water bodies. The point of these artificial water bodies is actually to rejuvenate or replenish the groundwater levels in that city, so that water will seep into the groundwater. Whether CEEW is working on preventing the river and water bodies pollution by draining industrial effluent. Right. So, like we are working with urban local bodies in the country to develop reuse of treated use water plans for them. What the plans would essentially do is set targets for the city as to how much of water they should be reusing, and in effect, how much of the pressure on fresh water resources will be reduced, and in turn, also improving the water quality of the local sources of water. And one of the aspects that we are considering as part of the reuse plan, which I think is very essential, is water bodies rejuvenation, because that is very directly linked. Most of the untreated, used water, along with semi-treated used water, is discharged into our water bodies. So we are looking at ways in which water bodies can be rejuvenated, either through the use of treated used water or through the use of other solutions such as constructed wetlands, etc. Whether any government project is selling treated water to industrial sector. Yes, absolutely. There are many cities that where the urban local bodies are selling treated used water specifically to industries. Surat is one very good example. Chennai again is another ULB where the sewage board is selling used water to industries. Industries, farmers, uh, and the construction sector. These three sectors, I think, as far as the private sector is concerned, are potential users of treated used water. Other than that, the treated used water can be used for horticulture, landscaping, road cleaning, even fire hydrants. So the WRC water reuse certification is actually something that the Maharashtra government has not implemented yet, but they are exploring. So within that scheme, what they will do is they will set up a specific authority for overlooking the process of water reuse certificates. But that, I think, is something that we will know better once such a scheme is implemented. That example was more to show that such an initiative or such a mechanism such as the carbon trading scheme can actually be applied to water use as well. Um, what is the vital role of government bodies, including Pollution Control Board, of promoting the usage of treated water in the industries to prevent pollution of water bodies and groundwater? As I mentioned, firstly, it is the urban local bodies that will be implementing the reuse projects. So they play a vital role. But in addition to that, the pollution control boards, I think where they can come in is actually by developing and setting treated wastewater quality standards and benchmark that are specific to the reuse. As I mentioned, currently we only have discharge specific standards in place. What we require are reuse specific standards in place so that we can safely implement the reuse of treated use water. What about decentralized small-scale STPs? We heard Delhi tried something on those lines. Yes, so the decentralized treatment currently in the country is a little sporadic in nature. That is, one-off cities are implementing it. You're very right. Delhi has implemented decentralized treatment. There is a housing colony here called Moti Bagh, which is a government colony, wherein they have installed a decentralized treatment plant for the colony itself, wherein the sewage from that colony is being treated on site, and that water is being used for gardening and landscaping within the colony itself. They also have a decentralized solid waste and composting system on site as well. So the thing about using treated use water to replenish lakes or water bodies, there is certainly a concern of the level of treatment. The level of treatment should be essentially up to tertiary level of treatment so that it is safe to be let out into rivers and water bodies. But as far as using treated use water for replenishing the groundwater levels, an example of Delhi can be given where they are actually using secondary use water to develop artificial lakes. And the point of those artificial lakes is to replenish the groundwater levels. I think I've covered all the questions. Who is the certification body for WWRC? I think that's the Maharashtra model that I've already referred to. And decentralized small-scale STPs also has been covered. Yes. If there are any other questions, I'll be happy to address.
Yeah, anyone has any other questions? Hope we have not missed out anything from the
list.
Yeah, from the list. There was some repetition, of course. Just want to know, even this reuse policy, it has to be dynamic, right? Because I saw Rajasthan policy is 2016.
Exactly.
So a lot of things have changed. Is there some built-in mechanism to make it dynamic, or is there some review mechanism even in those policies which have been in some states?
Yes, now that the National Framework for Safe Reuse of Treated Water has come out, it has set guidelines that states should follow to formulate either new policies or update the existing ones. So these states that had adopted these policies before the National Framework are required to revise their policies so they can relook at how, what are the areas or what are the priority users that they had defined in their existing policies. What are the kind of allocation mechanisms they should be looking at. Most of these policies had not defined pricing mechanism, as in what would be the price of this treated use water that should be defined. There should also be provisions for the kind of business models that should be adopted for implementing these reuse projects, which is something that these policies should have mandates for. And also lastly, to have that kind of allocation of responsibilities wherein either a dedicated authority or a vehicle is put in place for the monitoring and evaluation of this process. So very rightly pointed out, it is essential that we have updated and accessible policies, even at the state level in place, even those that had already adopted reuse policies.
Venkat, you want to ask anything?
Yeah, there was
yeah.
One question on seawater mix up with the groundwater to increase the salinity of groundwater, especially in coastal cities.
Right. I think I missed that question.
Yeah.
So the question is seawater mix up with groundwater. Let me just find the question.
We can read out if you want. What is your comment on sea?
I can't find it.
Yeah, okay. What is your comment on seawater mix up with groundwater to increase the salinity of groundwater, especially in coastal cities? What is the major reason for increasing the salinity of the groundwater?
Right. I mean, if seawater is mixed up with groundwater, I'm not sure exactly what kind of mixing up you're referring to, but if that does happen, it will increase the salinity of groundwater. And in order to reduce the salinity, there are desalination plants that are set up especially in coastal cities in the country. So, somebody was asking about why not decentralized treatment? So we can actually have decentralized treatment of both wastewater and desalinized water. And this water can later actually be used for different purposes. So there are certain interventions that are being taken place, especially in coastal cities.
Whether the council has joined hands with any of the corporates for any specific projects to guide them?
Right. So like I mentioned, we are working with urban local bodies to implement reuse and to strengthen their governance on reuse. And in that process, what we are doing is that we will be, and we are sort of in the process of working with the private sector and companies. So, for example, if in one city we feel that the construction sector is, a potential reuser of treated used water. So the idea is to actually work with a large developer or construction mogul in that area, so that we can actually implement the reuse of treated water within some development or residential township that may be coming up in that area. So like I mentioned, it is essential that there is partnership with the private sector, so that the water that actually is being treated by the government in the centralized STPs, that can be provided for reuse within some area within the city. So, that could be industries, that could be construction sector. So again, that's very context specific. What are the kind of reuse avenues that will, work city to city?
One corollary question, probably, despite policies, some cities and states are running into deep trouble with no water. Is it because of poor implementation or any other reason?
I think that is a very, very loaded question. We'll probably need another 1 hour to discuss that. But yeah, I mean, one thing is, even if we look at the state level policies, it is essential, like ma'am mentioned, to revise and update these policies to meet the current situation. One is that. Second thing is the implementation of these policies. If we talk about urban areas, which was, the theme of my session, is that these implementation lies with the city authorities. So in alignment with the state level policies, we need to have action plans in place at the city level that set targets for the city level. So, these targets can be how much treatment is required at the city level, or how much of reuse can we achieve till a particular year, say by 2030. And then, of course, bringing in financially feasible models to actually implement these action plans need to be in place. Secondly, it's very important to have access to municipal data, which is something that is a key concern in the country. Municipal level data for anything, this is specific to use water management, is a lacking area. So if we don't have a comprehensive database in place as to what is currently happening, it will be very difficult to formulate comprehensive action plans that we can further implement. So I think these are few areas that sort of require improvement, but maybe we can have another session for that.
Yeah, sure. What about JGM? I don't know what it means, JJM.
So Jal Jeevan Mission actually.
Jal Jeevan Mission, okay.
I'm assuming.
Should be.
Jal Jeevan Mission is specific to drinking water. Provision of drinking water to all the villages in the country, household level tap water connections should be provided. As far as used water is concerned, we are not recommending used water to be used for drinking purposes. This is water meant for non-potable purposes, that is not for human contact. So we're not recommending it for drinking purposes, even though there's some countries that are treating it to a level where, they are using it for drinking. But as far as JJM is concerned, I mean, I don't understand what the question is, but if we are talking about what is the drawback there, is that you are providing household level tap connections to households in the country. But what is important is the source sustainability, that the tap is actually receiving the right quality quantity of water. So that source sustainability is actually an issue with JJM right now.
So Shivaraman, you have anything to ask?
No, I think I was wanting to ask a couple of questions on Chennai, but I think you already covered that. Singapore, I mean, just on the reuse part of it, Singapore is already recycling their sewage to drinking water quality and blending it with their drinking water supply. So I don't think that's something that's not doable, but like you said, India, it will take a long time to get our heads around it.
Yes, I think right now, since we have such a large treatment infrastructure in place already that is providing us with secondary level or even in some places tertiary level of reuse treated water, the first step should be to make sure that we can reuse that existing treated water to the maximum level. And the next step would probably be, after we achieve that, would be upgradation of the technology for ultraviolet filtration, etc., oxidation, etc., so that we can reach a point where we can treat it to a level where we can actually use it for drinking water. So yeah, it's a step-by-step process. But since we already have such an infrastructure in place for secondary and tertiary treatment, I think the idea first should be to maximize that.
Any other question from anyone? One last question probably. Venkat, you can have the last word then.
Okay. Yeah, I think when we talk of water, the first thing that everybody's eyes and ears stand up, because we are all concerned about water, especially with the situation we read about our neighboring cities like Bangalore. Unfortunately, we read about it more in terms of jokes in WhatsApp, but it's a serious situation that probably we are also getting into it, and many other cities in India are getting into it. So treated use water is something which is, I think, an area of the future, and I think very well covered by Saiba Gupta, who's got a very good system in place to evaluate the amount of progress that is being made by various cities. And I think there's a lot of learning from these cities which are in the outstanding level, let's say 3 and above out of 5, for the other cities like Tamil Nadu and others to learn from their experiences. I think your marking system is definitely going to help and go a long way. I think very well covered. I'm very, very thankful to Saiba for spending her time and covering it for all of us. Thank you, and let's hope we have more such presentations in future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope the session was productive and useful. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Saiba. Thank you very SST. Thank you so much.